It just wasn't there, okay? And we had a song leader, and he knew how to wave his hand to "At the Cross." And we would sing sometimes 2 times a service, "At the Cross." So it was "At the Cross, at the Cross." And he had it down, and it was the only song the pianist knew, because she was just trying to learn how to play the piano, because no one else, it was the early days. So anyway, I understand Jill's desire there to play "At the Cross." It's very, very nostalgic. All right, let's dismiss the kids at this time. All right, they can head back. All right. In some cases, it's not an option. Ezekiel. He's heading back. All right. We are excited about 25 years and really so grateful. My heart's overwhelming with gratitude toward the Lord. Anniversaries are kind of about looking back. And when we look back on what God's done and how inspiring. And I think of just a handful of people and renting a building. I don't know if you saw that display behind the information counter out there. That was, we used that display on the 20th anniversary. And so you've got to add 5 more years. So if it says 1,040 sermons, you got to add 5 more years onto that. So probably another 250 years, whatever that would be. You do the math, all right? And but a lot of those things are still true. 1 tornado, 1 fire, all those things that we've gone through as a church, as a body of people. But when I think, when we first started, we didn't have a dime, and look what God has done. I mean, that is God, and only God can do those things in a relatively short amount of time. So as we celebrate the anniversary, it is about looking back, and I'm inspired by the things God has done. I am encouraged by the things God has done, and in looking back on 25 years is just full of fond memories, and it really is just a blessed church in many, many ways. And with that said, Jill and I are part of our 45th anniversary that we are celebrating, not next week, but the next week we'll be heading out of town and for a vacation time. I want to introduce Pastor Joel Elliott. Pastor Joel, would you stand up and take a bow? Okay. Don't overdo it. Thank you. All right. Yeah. He's going to be filling the pulpit for me while I'm gone, and they joined last week. He's in between churches. He's just seeking out what God would have him do, and conveniently for me, that it was really nice to have him available, and so we're looking forward to hearing you preach. I'll be watching online, so don't think, okay, the preacher's gone, I can talk about him, all right? I will be watching, so, but no, that's such a blessing. Thank you. And the whole family has been such a blessing, and we're excited about them, so thank you much. But what's kind of neat, though, is when you look at looking back, and just, the fond memories or what God has done kind of thing. God encourages people to do that. Look what he did in Deuteronomy. And let me give you the backdrop. Don't read it. Look over here. Quit reading it. Okay. I'll take it away. Okay, so here's the backdrop to this. Yep, see? Thank you, Sam. All right, no, quit it. All right, so the backdrop to this verse all right, is Moses wrote the Pentateuch. It's first 5 books of the Bible, and it covers several things. And a lot of scholars believe that Moses understood he was a Hebrew and knew he was a child of God, and God gave him special revelation in the sense that he told him about the beginning of time. And so Moses wrote the book of the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis, is historical and how life became, okay, how the human race started, how the entire world, universe started. That's Genesis. Genesis means beginnings. All right, then there was Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy is a book of the law. And Deuteronomy, Genesis, Exodus was a history book about how they exited from Egypt, and when they exited from Egypt, they were a nation of slaves, and then they became and when they first started out, it took 40 years to kind of bring them out of that slave mentality. But by the time they entered the Promised Land, they were a mean fighting machine. That was Israel, and so that was the book of Exodus. Now you get in Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus. Leviticus is the tribe of Levi is the priest. They were set aside to serve God and do the ministerial task of serving God, and they had an elaborate tabernacle system, temple system, and they were, given charge of doing that. And that's why it's called Leviticus, for the Levites, and this is how you do that. This is how you worship. These are our rules, and this is the jobs, and that kind of thing. So it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Numbers is kind of chronology. It just, keeping track of tribes and who's who and that kind of thing. But in all these books, you've got commandments wrapped up inside of them, and stories that are inspiring and challenging and cautioning, okay? And all that happens all together. But then you come to the book of Deuteronomy. In the book of Deuteronomy, he again is teaching them how to have a orderly society. So here you were, Israel, as a nation. You were a nation of slaves. You were told when to get up. You were told when to sleep. You were told when to eat. You were told when you could take a break. You were told when you could go to the bathroom. You were told how to live. There was no options. There was no choice in life. They were a nation of slaves. Okay, so God is giving them, just commands and how to be a civilization, a civilized people. So remember the days of old. That's what he's telling Israel. Civilized people, this is what you do. You remember the days of old. Well, we're remembering 25 years. And that's a good and right thing to do. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy fathers, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. So we put up pictures and everything of all that we've gone through, because remembering helps us to appreciate the things that God's given us. But here's kind of a caution, is that we need to handle the past correctly. You can maybe you're going through a tough time today in the present, and it's so tough that you remember back to a time, previous in the past, that you get stuck in the past. I see people that get stuck in the past all the time, and sometimes it's, mundane, sometimes it's harmless, it's not a big deal. But have you noticed, I don't know what the deal is, but every once in a while, I can tell you just by looking at a guy who graduated from high school in the 70s. Because they're still wearing boot cut, and they still wear the old boots. They look like they're still dressing for the 70s. They get stuck in that era. The best days of my life were, when I was in high school, and you still dress like it. You got to get out of the past, all right? So here's the thing. You can remember back, but don't digress into the past, because that can be harmful. it can actually make you revert back to, and if you've got a painful memory of the past, you can't live there. Can't let the past, as much as we enjoy remembering the days of old and considering the years of many generations, as much as it's right and proper to do those things, we can't let the bad things of the past affect the present. Friend, if you're wrestling with something in the past, if you're carrying baggage, and whether it's a bad relationship or a bad job or a bad accident, or whatever, there might have been some abuse of some sort, or maybe a personal failure, maybe it was a money failure, maybe it was bankruptcy. It just you can't live there and let the past destroy the present. The fact of the matter is, you can't do anything about the past. Is that not correct? But here's the truth. God can. God can do something about your past, even if it's bad. Romans, very familiar verse. You probably got this memorized. We know that all things work together for good. All things work together for good. I've said this 100 times. I'll say it 100 more times. You got to let them work. Not all things are good. That abuse, that failure, that personal failure, that problem at work, your fault, their fault, nobody's fault. It just, you're gone, and it just is, it's ate at you, or a relationship that went bad, whatever. You got to let it work. Not all things are good. And by no means did God cause all things. We're human. We live in a failing or a flawed society. And we need to realize that, wait a minute, it wasn't good, but all things can work together for good. So, you can't do anything about your past. Don't find yourself dwelling in the past. And realize that even though I can't do anything good about my past, God can. God can take that tragedy, that trauma, that thing, and He can somehow get glory from it, somehow build you from it, whether it makes you stronger or you now have an experience that you can draw off of. It makes you wiser. Whatever it is, understand this, that God can do something about your past, but you can't. So don't dwell there, and let God take control of whatever that is that's out of control. Paul encourages us not to get stuck in the past. And as we, are opening up the scriptures here, I want you to kind of realize that, yes, we as an 25th anniversary are looking back for 25 years. We're not stuck in the past. And when we look back at what God has done and the admirable things that we see in life and the fond memories, and we acknowledge failures and we acknowledge problems and tragedies. We don't pretend like they didn't happen. You're going to see out there, if you take a gander at some of the memorabilia out there, when we were at the church in West Peoria, and that was a miracle in and of itself. We're not going to try to take our time and explain all how God brought that about. But there we were a handful of people and given $1 million plus facility. It was amazing what God did, and yet we had so much stuff. Because the facility was so big and grandiose. Okay, that we decided probably need to just downsize and sell some things off, And one of the things that we had no use for, we thought maybe this is worth something. So one of the men in the church, he put it in a paper, and by golly, we got several people, that hit on it, and it was a pipe organ. And the pipe, it had 40-foot tubes going up, and they kind of went, you try to think of a grandiose pipe organ, and that's twice I used the word grandiose, 8 more times than I can call it part of my vocabulary. And so, we had this grandiose pipe organ, and we had no use for it really, and we didn't, praise music doesn't lend itself to pipe organs, right? And some guy wants to buy it. So he shows up and he says, does it work? And I said, well, does it work? Wait till you hear this, all right? And I flip it on, and it takes a while for the thing to get going, and so you can kind of hear it start. It's like starting an old John Deere tractor, It really gets a rolling, all right? And I sit down, and I pretend like I, get my tails, out from under, and sit on and I play Day Tripper. Okay, it's the only song I know how to play on the piano. I even thought about going over and playing Day Tripper for you on the piano, but I'm not going to. But I'm playing Day Tripper now. Everybody thinks that's funny, and I thought it was funny. And and I mean, how often do you get to play the piano when you can't? I can barely play the radio. I do know how to play Day Tripper. Okay, so I play the guy Day Tripper on a pipe organ, which, by the way, if you've never heard Day Tripper on a pipe organ, you have not lived. All right, so he says, all right, I'm going to get with my people and find out what it would cost to move this thing. It's big, it's a big deal to move, and it's going to cost several thousand to disassemble it, move it, and take it, I think they were in southern Illinois, and assemble it back together, and we'll make a bid on it. I said, okay, that's great. I forgot to turn it off. And that night, I gutted the church. It caught fire, and it gutted the entire sanctuary. Don't think I've played Day Tripper since, actually. But honestly, it was kind of devastating for a young, small church. But honestly, God brought us through that. The stained glass windows, all that, it was all covered. The insurance covered everything. But it had to work together for good. Today, I don't like to look back on those days where we had the tragedy of walking into the church and it's just gutted. It's everything. But you'll find out there, if you look at some of the memorabilia, when we were in West Peoria, the big thing in West Peoria, and if you're going to be a part of the community, you got to take part in it, was the 4th of July parade. And it's still a big thing to this day, the West Peoria 4th of July parade. It really is quite amazing. Well, we put a praise band on a float, an elaborate float. Andrea said it was a good thing I was young back then because I am not shoving any more, tissue paper into chicken wire again, And they worked their tails off, had these beautiful floats, and we show up with our float and come to find out we're the only one that's really got like an official float. So we won, best float contest. Well, the next year, we thought, okay, we put in that much effort again. We won the best float contest. And the next year they were like, well, we can't give it to the cross, a third time. So we won, they made up a new category and we won. So we've got all these trophies, okay? If you go out there in memorabilia, you're going to see trophies that look like something out of the Cat of the Hat. They're all melted and just look at it. They were in the sanctuary the day of the fire, or the night of the fire, okay? And so, we went through some hard times, but we know these things work together for good. Remember the fondness, remember the things that God has done, the miraculous things that he's done. Israel remembered back over and over and over. They're told to remember back at the Red Sea, when the Red Sea parted and they walked across some dry ground. We can remember back at, just miracles that God did and not dwell on the tornado. When all of us were, back in the back and were singing with a guitar as a tornado went over and destroyed Washington. We don't have to dwell on that and be fearful of tornadoes. We don't have to be fearful of fires and the horrible things that come our way, through life. But just realize all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. Paul said, here's how you handle the past. This is what Paul says. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended. I haven't made it. I'm not settled in. I'm not settled down. I'm not stuck in the past. But this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind. He's not talking about forgetting, and this is kind of a paradox, right? And this is what God does. So many, paradoxes in the Bible. But he's saying, we can remember with fondness the things of the past that God has done. But if there's something in your life that's hindering you from moving forward, this church, if there's something in the church's life that's hindering us from actually preaching the gospel and getting the word out there, then we need to forget those things. Forget those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before. Find out our goals. Maybe you just need to get rid of the clutter and say, okay, what is it I really need to focus on? And those other things that have cluttered my life, let's keep the main thing, and press toward the mark. Whatever that goal is, you press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God. So, forgetting in context, where it says forgetting those things, in context, he's not talking about not remembering good things. He's talking about the things that hinder us from moving forward. So, if you find yourself out of control, in other words, the past is controlling your life, and you are controlling your life by going into the past and getting stuck there, then you're out of control. You have to let God control your life. And he won't do that by having you dwell on the ills of the past. Like I said before, the Bible is full of paradoxes. And the last shall be first. It doesn't seem to make sense, does it? And the first shall be last. When I'm weak, then I'm strong. Those things, they're hard to understand, but yet if you're in the middle of it, you get it. When I'm weak, physically I can't do it anymore, then I lean on Jesus, now I'm strong. When I put myself first, in the eyes of God, I'm last. But I put myself last and I humble myself, then I'm first in the eyes of God. He also says this in Luke. This is kind of the parable of the paradox, right? Or a principle of the paradox, I should say. Whosoever will save his life shall lose it. So if you are trying, by the way, whosoever will save is talking about trying to control it. Your desire is to make it better. If you are operating that way, where I desire to make my life better, I'm going to do it, you're going to lose your life. It's not going to be a quality life. But whosoever will lose their life, in other words, my life's out of control. I just gotta let God take control. So I quit trying to control my life. I lose my life for Jesus' sake. The same shall save it. So when you say, okay, I'm not controlling this thing anymore, because when I control this thing, my life, I have a tendency to let it get out of control. But when I just give it up and say, you know what, Lord, I'm done. I'm going to lose my life. I'm going to save it. I know. It's the principle of a paradox. So God will take control because, and honestly, that's good news, right? Because when you think about it, when the moment you say yes to God, God, you take over. I want you to run things. Then the pressure's off. You don't have to figure it out anymore. Because God will begin to lead, guide, and direct. So when the pressure's off, realize that God's got a plan for me. And realize that, and some of us sometimes, and sometimes this is a cause and effect of maybe an abuse in the past. Maybe you had a rough upbringing, that kind of thing. But the fact is that sometimes we think that God's got it in for us. And especially those that were raised by guardians or parents or whatever that were always like looking for a fault or looking for a problem or was harsh disciplinarians, and we think, okay, God's got it in for me. My parents had it in for me. My guardians had it in for me. My teacher had it in for me. So we think that because those people who were above us, in authority, so to speak, had it in for me, therefore God's got it in for me. That's not true. When Jeremiah, he says this, all right? He says, "For I know thy thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace, not evil." God's got a plan for you. If you just don't dwell in the past, don't let your life get out of control, and say yes to God, that you take control, realize that, okay, now the pressure's off. I don't have to try and decide what to do, because God will lead and guide me, and realize that God's for you. And that may seem elementary to some of us, but to some of us, that is a huge mountain to climb. So, God will take control, and He will do. And I'm going to finish with this. He will do what you expect Him to do in your life. He will do what you expect Him. If you expect God to do very little in your life, you know what God will do? Very little in your life. But if you expect great things, that God can use you and do great things, then you're going to see the supernatural happen. And I'm not just preaching to somebody that's going to get called in the minute. I'm just saying the average everyday Christian that goes to work every day and punches a clock or signs in or shows up and then puts in 8 hours and comes home. The average working man, if he will expect God to do great things in his life, then God will do great things in his life. Look at this contrast, okay? The paradox, if you will, all right? And this is Jesus. I'll give you the backdrop. Jesus is back at Nazareth. It's his hometown, and honestly, they were very questioning about him. And it's like, yeah, we're hearing all these grandiose stories. That's 4. We hear all these grandiose stories, all right, and that's 5 now. And we know who you are. We know your brothers and sisters. We know your parents. And we're hearing you do miracles. We're hearing that you're probably the Messiah. There ain't no way. I mean, that was their attitude toward Jesus. And that was the backdrop. Here it is. He could do no mighty work there. Did I just walk out of the frame? Sorry about that, Internet. I'm back. All right. So he could do no mighty work there. Save that he laid hands on a few sick people. Like, no big deal at this point, All right, and he healed them. And it says, and he, Jesus, marveled because of their unbelief. They didn't expect Jesus to do anything. So you know what Jesus did? Nothing. Very little. Healed a few. A few that had, personal faith. But if you realize God can use me, God can do something with me, God will rise to the level of your expectation. And if you expect God to do nothing in your life, then nothing will be done in your life. But if you expect God to do great things, now unto him that is able to do, God, Jesus, is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we ask or think. Unto him. The next verse talks about, now unto him is the glory. So unto him the glory, right? Because he's able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we ask or think. And it's according to the power that works in us. You expect a little, you get a little. You expect a lot from God, you'll get a lot. In fact, you'll get more than you can ask or think. When that power of belief that God can use me, that God can do something with me. I'm just, you say, you know what, I'm just a single person. I'm just one guy, one woman. I just, I don't see where my position and my status at work or my position in life or in my position in society, I don't see where, no. God can do something great with you. You just got to believe it. You just got to have that power of belief working in you. So, we remember back on the things God's done. We admire and we are in awe of the things he's done. Those things that are rough, those things that are bad, those things, we don't dwell on those things. We let God we just let God control those things, and he works those things together for good, and we forget the bad things, and we press toward the good things. And we realize that when I lose my life, I'll gain it. So we realize that paradox, the truth of that, and then we realize that, if we expect little, we'll get little. But if we expect great things, he'll show up and do greater things. So, where are you at? What's your expectation? We're staring at 2022, and I know the cliches have gone around. What do you do in 22? I don't care what you do in 22. I care what God does with you in 22. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word, and we thank you that we can look back with fondness on so many memories. And Lord, I pray that you would in a mighty way, challenge us to just get out of control and give God control of our lives. And use us in a mighty way. We ask these things in his precious name.